Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's chief political correspondent, Jessica Elgot, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole, with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see the front pages then. Let's start with the Metro. Time to end the online hate. The Metro reports on a call for a David's Law to tackle internet trolls. The Guardian leading with the same story with an image of MPs holding a minute's silence to pay tribute to their lost colleague David Amess. The Eye leads on MPs vowing to continue to meet the public face to face in the wake of Sir David's murder while meeting constituents. Meanwhile, David Amess's local paper, The Echo, leads with the news that Southend will become a city fulfilling one of the late MP's wishes. The Daily Mail has a CCTV image showing a man understood to be Ali Harbi Ali, the suspect arrested on suspicion of killing Sir David, walking along a North London street just hours before the MP was killed. The Telegraph reports on warnings from experts that the COVID vaccine booster programme is moving too slowly, leaving the most vulnerable at risk over the winter. The Financial Times leads on the possibility of an interest rate rise soon as next month, in fact, to tackle inflation. And The Sun even, has a story on Strictly dancer Katya Jones. So Jessica and Harry are here with us. And after a very difficult weekend, Harry, that was perhaps the best of our Parliament today.
Yes, but with a sort of grim familiarity about it all. It was sort of felt as a sort of mood of grim awareness in Westminster, thinking a lot about memory of PC Keith Palmer, who died in the New Palace Yard, killed by a radical terrorist, and of course Jo Cox, who died in her constituency, killed by a radical terrorist. And it's it is grim. It was the best of our Parliament, but it's one side of Parliament you never really want to see. And the tributes were flowing tonight. The church service I thought was particularly moving, and sort of a silver lining of joy in Southend that they've finally got their city status that David Amess has been banging on about for the better part of 20 years. But again, in a scenario that no one wants to see, it's sort of good news. But in the circumstances that everyone wishes had not happened.
Yeah, Southend. I mean, such poignancy. He would have loved to see that happen, wouldn't he?
Can you imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a real fitting tribute, and actually quite emotional when that announcement came for many in the House, no doubt. Many of whom, desperately struggle to hold on to their emotions today as they paid tribute, and with great humour, which reflected the man, obviously. But let's move on to the policy that might evolve from this. The Guardian, your paper, in fact, your article, Jessica, this idea to crack down on social media abuse of public figures, most specifically by ending online anonymity. So tell us more about your article.
Yeah, so this was a proposal by Mark Francois, a good friend of David Amess. He called him his political mentor, and he talked about how, rather than this being specifically linked to Sir David's killing, it's more that he said that this is something that Sir David himself had been concerned about in recent years. He'd written about in his book. He talked about how difficult he'd found it seeing particularly female MPs, female colleagues experiencing online abuse. And Mark Francois said that he was prepared to drag the Twitter and Facebook CEOs to the House of Commons and make them hear the tales that MPs could tell about how much abuse they'd received. And he's mentioned ending online anonymity. That's not something that's currently in the bill, but Priti Patel said that she was interested in making the bill tougher. I think there are a lot of arguments around this. The debate today wasn't about having those arguments, really. It was about paying tribute, remembering Sir David and everything that he brought to politics. But I think in the coming days there may well be a debate about how much does this kind of move really change what happened to him. Obviously we've still got someone to be charged, but as Harry said, the incidents we've seen in recent years in the killing of Jo Cox, the killing of PC Palmer attacks on other MPs, including Stephen Timms, they were mainly by lone wolf radical terrorists, where you might say that there's security failings to be interrogated, but online abuse is its own issue, and I think rather than maybe connecting it to his death, it would be more, any sort of change that was to be pushed by MPs would be more about something that he was concerned about.
Well, I suppose the connection is that it just increases the fear of the Member of Parliament if they have it. I mean, Dame Margaret Hodge told Adam Bolton today she'd received 90,000 abusive social media mentions in a 2-month period. The experience makes her think very carefully about tweeting anything at all. That's around 1,500 per day. She doesn't hold surgeries anymore, preferring to tackle it through a different route. I mean, this is cowering people, Harry, isn't it? This, the way they have to live through this rubbish.
I'm in slightly two minds about this, as Jess sort of touched on there. I think it is important that we don't conflate these two issues, and there is a really, really stark conversation to be had about whether our security services are able to cope with this new sort of lone radicalised wolf. It's very hard to stop someone buying a knife and doing something random. A security analyst we spoke to today, and we're quoted in the paper tomorrow, has called them the sort of Nike terrorists. They're really hard to spot and trace because they just do it. And there's not very much warning, there's not very much lead time, there's no chatter around it. And it's extremely hard to control. Then there's also an entirely separate debate to be had, as Jess said, about the online anonymity, the abuse that the MPs get. The bitter irony of all this is just today, anyone seeming to even back the idea or even trying to have this conversation about the idea of taking some of that tension out of politics, maybe addressing these issues, is hit themselves by a torrent of foul abuse from online trolls. You just have to go on any of our colleagues or any of the MPs who sort of put their head above the parapet on this front, and you'll see it there. Something really does need to be done, but I do think these conversations need to be kept incredibly separate, and one shouldn't really, I don't think, be drowning out the other in terms of column inches and broadcast time and discussion in Parliament, I think, because we need to have both of these conversations within their own right.
Yeah, and many people would suggest if the police investigated every threat made to anybody who puts their head above the parapet in any way, there would be no time for any other form of policing. But in terms of the anonymity, just quoting you in your article, Jessica, campaigners have warned that ending online anonymity could put both whistleblowers and pro-democracy campaigners in authoritarian regimes at risk. So there's a balance in every move, is there not? But let's go to the Southend Echo, or the Eye, rather. MPs vow to meet public face-to-face. I guess this depends, this is an individual thing now, isn't it? Certainly. What's the overall impression you're getting, Jessica?
Yes, and I think, there are certainly some MPs who I spoke to today, and there are fewer that were willing to say this in public. I think Margaret Hodge said it, and also Tobias Elwood has kind of said it as well. But, that they feel like it is getting too risky to meet the public face-to-face. Most MPs don't feel that. They feel like that it's a kind of vital part of the British parliamentary system. It's vital for people to be able to meet their MPs. It's democratic for them to be able to go and ask things of their elected representative. But frankly, it also keeps them in touch. And I've written, one of the inside pieces I've written today is, got an MP saying they know which of their colleagues don't really do their constituency surgeries as much as they should do because they're just out of touch. And that goes for MPs out of all parties. They're people who kind of have pet obsessions and they don't really keep in touch with the complex housing, welfare needs, immigration needs, people who need to challenge corporations when they've cut off someone's energy bills for no reason. That's the kind of thing that MPs need to keep them grounded in the real world. And meeting people to face every week, as MPs, including cabinet ministers often do. The suspect himself his MP is Keir Starmer, and Starmer went ahead with his constituency surgery on Friday. Everybody, the vast majority of the House of Commons, do them, but that's not to say they're not scared. Often they know that is the place where they're the most vulnerable. They have to advertise where they're going to be, and we know that unfortunately that's what Sir David Amess had advertised, exactly where he was going to be on Friday. And so it is obviously, a place where they're vulnerable. And one MP told me that members of the public, because she'd received so many threats, and people in her local area had offered to come and be kind of de facto bodyguards for her at surgeries because, she didn't feel like the police were really doing anything or responding to any concerns that she had. But, can you have the police stationed outside these places? Does that fundamentally change the kind of atmosphere, the environment it is? People can come and raise their issues. I don't know. It's a tricky balance to strike.
But what we have learned, if we look at the Echo, the Southend, Castle Point, Rayleigh and Rochford paper, as it says on the banner headline there, is what constituency MPs can deliver for their people. We heard from the Prime Minister today that Sir David's views often confounded expectation and defied easy stereotype, that he was the master of private members' bills and 10-minute rule bills. And we also heard during the tributes today that one of the main reasons why he'd put his dog forward for, what was it, Parliament or Westminster Dog of the Year? I can't remember, was that the dog was a real supporter of Southend becoming a city. That's one of the reasons. I mean, there's some lovely touches today, and as we see there it is. So Southend, confirmed by the Queen, Harry.
Yeah, look, the crowning touch of a 20-year campaign, and as we said earlier, a very sad one. But again, it kind of shows you, as you said, exactly what an MP can achieve. And if they do spend their lives to the backbenches and private members' bills and campaigns and working across the House, which you have to do if you're going to become these sort of powerful backbenchers, you need to support right across the aisle. And I do think that is, one of the most cherished parts of our democratic system. If you look across the pond to America, there used to be days where senators would be carried aloft on the shoulders of voters, and congressmen and the like would go door to door, and that's just all gone now. American politicians are surrounded by multi-layers of security. Someone was telling me a lovely story today that Angela Merkel, when she used to get behind the scenes at sort of EU summits, would say to David Cameron, "Oh, David, come here. Tell them about your surgeries. What have you had this week? What have you heard?" And he'd regale tales of, someone coming to complain that school kids were throwing conkers at his greenhouse or something so parochial and minor like that, but which is the bread and butter of the British democratic system. I think it keeps our politicians humble, and it keeps them grounded in a way that they do have to go from the corridors of power to the armoured limos and the RAF jets flying around the world to Friday afternoon in the constituency, meeting normal people with normal concerns and hearing problems. And I think if that link was broken, it will be, forever to this country's detriment. And I think David Amess, not wanting to put words in his mouth, but I think he was a massive supporter for this. And I think if his legacy was to see that weakened in any way, then I think that would be a real tragedy. However, there is on the other side of the coin, how do you do it? If you put policemen into these constituency surgeries, lots of people you might suspect might not come forward and be so open. And so it's that balance is a notoriously hard problem to solve, one which would have been solved already. But I can't help but think the problem is it's going to end up resulting,
Okay.
however you clamp down on it, you're going to break that little link between the MP and their people, and that is something that needs to be avoided.
Yes, sorry, we have to just take a break and come back with more. But the Echo, South Essex remembers its champion, full 10 pages, remembering the person that stood up for all those reasons, as you said, for those people who lived in that area. Lots more still to come next. Why just 90,000 homes might be able to benefit from boiler vouchers to switch from gas. The news from the government this evening. Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, The Guardian's chief political correspondent, Jessica Elgot, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. And Harry, you and your team have got the PM writing in your paper about this idea to switch over boilers and a government grant to help us do it.
Yes, finally, the long-awaited heat and building strategy, which is how on earth the government are going to meet the 2050 net zero carbon promises, including as we've discussed many times on this programme, ripping out boilers and replacing them with expensive heat pumps. And it turns out, actually, tomorrow's going to be a bit of a hopscotch. It's going to be a bit of a, wing it, see where we are in 10 years. Hopefully the technology will move on, but in the meantime, have £5,000 to replace your boiler with a heat pump. Whether it will work, whether they'll be queuing up around the blocks to do this, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's generally air source heat pumps. You need quite a lot of land or a very deep borehole, don't you, for a ground source heat pump, which some people, find quite bulky, quite expensive. The idea you get £5,000 to make it the same cost as if you're replacing to your gas boiler. But not enough people will be helped, according to the Telegraph, Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, 90,000 homes is, it's nothing. That's not, that's, obviously it's better than nothing, probably I should say, but it's not going to be the thing that helps us hit that target. I mean, what the PM's essentially banking on here is that this subsidy means that by the time that more boilers need replacing, that the price will have gone down, and it's effectively, kind of betting the house on that happening. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to have to see that subsidy increase or a different plan altogether. But yeah, that on its own is certainly not going to be enough to do the job.
It starts in April for anyone who wants the £5,000, initially lasting for 3 years, funded with £450 million, which is where they get the 90,000 from. We'll talk more about that soon. Thank you very much indeed, Harry and Jessica. Thank you.